is Diane Dougherty, and I am a Roman Catholic woman priest from Painesville, Ohio. I'm a daughter of the church, and I have had a circuitous journey to this day and age, which is not just a surprise to you, it's a surprise to me. And to all of us, to tell you the truth. So let me begin by doing a reflection on the first reading, which was Isaiah. Did anybody know that 200 years passed between the writings of 1st Isaiah and 2nd Isaiah? In 1st Isaiah began in the 8th century BC, with the writings ending around 6th century BC. During those years, the people of God saw their land abused, homes destroyed, temple dismantled stone by stone. They themselves were deported to Babylon, where they lived in exile for 100 years or more. And in the reading that Carolyn read, they were, the second one and the first one, they were both Isaiah. You read the gospel. The Isaiah reading, the first reading. In the middle, they were returning from exile, but they were dreaming of Jerusalem, their beautiful city, on a hill that would be rebuilt. They were returning to establish their land again and become a people. In the Hebrew imagination, the building of the quote-unquote city of God was the height of their imagination. They had visions of buildings, walls, strengthened armies. But this passage from Isaiah gave people a different picture because it came right out of the mouth of the prophets, something they did not believe should be restored within a city. The image God sent did not match theirs. What the people saw and hoped for differed drastically from God's vision of a city on earth. Isaiah the prophet says, "This is what I seek. In my city, share your bread with the hungry, shelter the oppressed and homeless, clothe the naked when you see them. Don't turn your back on your own. Loose the chains of injustice, untie the cords of a yoke, set the oppressed free, break every yoke. And then you will be called repairers of broken walls, restorers of streets and dwellings." And that is how the city is restored. You who do that will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will appear. Isn't that interesting? So building the city of God involved something called bending the boundaries of our minds. Fast forward to today. Another theme taken from the reading that holds great meaning for me relates to light shining in the darkness. Today we live in a world where light is easily acceptable, and we really don't understand the literal darkness that people lived in. So it's harder for the metaphor to have meaning for us. However, we do know and have known what it's like to have inner darkness. All of us have. And the insecurities that are brought by societal changes of our time, that hasn't changed. And just as there was darkness that came over people through loss of their city, just as there was an experience of a loss of freedom as they became enslaved under the influence of oppressors, flowing from that inner darkness comes that longing to be free, to be in control of space and place. The longing for safety that we have in a defined location. Out of that darkness comes Isaiah's voice, giving rise to a God that was close, a God that waited in that same darkness, assuring them, the light will come, the light will arrive. So when Paul writes in Corinthians, I come to you in weakness and fear and much trembling, I get it. I spent years trying to fit my vocation into a framework that offered me something that just didn't work. I was a sister in Painesville, as many know. And I was with the sisters when we became most disobedient as we tried to live out the message of Isaiah. We advocated for fair wages in Painesville, a place in the church for the Hispanics to worship in Cleveland, a right to collaborate in building the parish in Georgia, and a place at the decision-making table in Atlanta. And for these bold requests, we were told not to return. We were evicted from convents. We as a parish were disbanded. And I was let go without cause and told I'd be given 1 week's pay. All that dedication, my belief in service to the gospel, proved futile, leaving my soul in a grave darkness, and those that loved me, the sisters, and the beautiful church and the God we served, in confusion. We joined a cadre of women who pushed boundaries for justice and lived every day with soul-sore spirits. In one of my writings, I mentioned that I felt as if God in this day and age called us forth with one hand in the hierarchy, pounded us down in the other. Instead of being a daughter of the church, Father Hansel gave me that name, we all became enemies of the hierarchy. For what? The darkness lived in me for so many years. It was as if the church that I knew, the building, the people, collapsed and was being destroyed. The more I studied and read about women globally, I realized this is an undiagnosed schizophrenia women live with, not just those called to the priesthood, but all women who are not able to experience the freedom and liberty of a life fully lived, women and men. With the entrance of RCWP, Roman Catholic women's priest, in 2002, and through the courage and bravery of people like Dagmar Celeste, a crack opened that I did not know existed. Dagmar was one of the first women ordained on the Danube. I had just lost my position as Director of Religious Education in Atlanta as a conservative group moved in like a train and began eliminating all of us in all our positions. And I remember smiling as I saw on the news this boat with these women. I thought, what's happening here? 10 years later, I found myself jumping off the cliff with the hands free. As a woman of faith, I have to admit, I'm still looking for that light shining through the darkness. But my faith is, by its very definition, means you have no path. In other words, you have no idea what you're doing, but you wake up with joyful hope. You do not know where you're going, but you follow your heart as you become enlightened by God. All along the way, you begin to identify a God that has a surprising sense of humor. From my earliest heart was grown right here in the dirt of these cities, Painesville, Ohio, and Fairport. Our grandfather was a fireman. Many sitting here today are my relatives, my family, my friends, those who sought God and followed the gospel and led me to it. We learned the lesson our ancient sisters learned when bold women or men speak out. You can crush us, but we will continue to live the gospel of love. So as I stepped out in my brokenness to follow the mandate written in the gospel, that bright light burst open and my healing began. I was broken, but I rose. You were broken, but you rose. I understand the hope that follows love. You do too. It is not for us to look toward the destruction of a temple, the church, the people, or a nation. It is for us to be about the light in others' darkness, to be the hope that new life will rise, to understand that as we repair broken walls and restore streets to new ways of dwelling in love with each other, we, as we walk, are the city of God. And it is in this the light breaks forth and our mutual healing appears.